Hello, welcome to Lesson 10 on Challenges and Future Directions on Multifunctional Agriculture. Today we'll talk about the barriers to implementing multifunctional agriculture. We will see how to integrate multifunctionality into future models, what the research gaps and areas for further studies are. The aim is to get a clear overview of the current issues and get an idea of how we could overcome them in the future. Are you ready? Let's get started. First of all, can you think about any challenges regarding multifunctional farms? How do you think this concept is going to evolve in the next few years? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. Okay, so multifunctionality in agriculture has emerged as a guiding paradigm to realign food production systems with broader societal, environmental, and territorial goals. However, its full implementation remains constrained by several barriers, institutional gaps, and conceptual uncertainties. This chapter highlights the main challenges and explores how multifunctionality can be more systematically integrated into future agricultural models, while also identifying key areas for further research. Despite its potential, the operability of multifunctionality faces technical, institutional, and governance barriers. A major challenge is the lack of coherent policy frameworks that can simultaneously address food security, environmental sustainability, and rural development. In many contexts, policies continue to favor productivity-oriented sectoral approaches that undervalue non-market outputs like cultural heritage or ecosystem services. By the way, do you remember what ecosystem services are? We talked about food provisioning or pollination or clean water, clean air, but also aesthetic values. If you wanna remember, if you don't remind it so well, I suggest to go back to the previous lesson. Then again, regarding barriers to implementation of multifunctional agriculture. Another significant barrier lies in the difficulty of measuring multifunctionality. Complex multidimensional outcomes are hard to qualify, and many benefits, for instance, landscape, aesthetics, or social cohesion, are intangible or emerge over long time frames. The use of indicators remains fragmented across countries and policy levels, leading to uneven implementation. Also, multifunctionality is often perceived as too content-specific or fuzzy to be standardized across regions. Infrastructures or agricultural multifunctionality frequently arises from opportunity-driven adaptations rather than from intentional pre-planned design. This reflects a broader issue. Multifunctionality is often reactive rather than embedded proactively into planning frameworks. Lastly, limited cross-sectoral collaboration hampers the integration of agriculture with other land uses, for instance, energy, tourism, conservation, particularly when institutional silos or administrative boundaries persist. So, how to integrate multifunctionality into future models? Although multifunctionality has been widely debated, several knowledge gaps persist. First, there is a need for longitudinal studies tracking how multifunctional systems evolve, including their resilience, economic viability, and social impact. Second, participatory research remains underutilized, despite its importance in capturing stakeholder values and co-designing effective indicators. The following research areas deserve greater attention. Operating in the Global South, where data scarcity, market volatility, and policy instability pose distinct challenges. Trade-offs analysis. More nuanced studies are needed to explore the conflicts between functions, for instance, between tourism and biodiversity, or carbon sequestration and food production. Then digital tools and spatial modeling. Geospatial data, simulation models, and digital twins can enhance multifunctionality assessments at farm and landscape scale. Economic valuation of non-market outputs, such as cultural ecosystem services, remain limited and are often excluded from cost-benefit analysis. Also, resilience pathways. How multifunctional systems contribute to recovery from shocks, economic, climatic, or social shocks, requires further empirical exploitation. Finally, future studies should expound on the role of infrastructure, particularly how agriculture interacts with energy, mobility, and communication systems to deliver cross-sectoral benefits. This integration is central to creating resilient agroecological territories capable of adapting to complex and uncertain futures. On the research gaps and areas for further study, we can say that despite the growing institutional and academic recognition of multifunctionality in agriculture, several important knowledge gaps remain that hinder its full integration into policy and practice. Understanding these gaps is essential to inform future research agendas and ensure that multifunctionality moves from a conceptual framework to a scalable, evidence-based tool for agricultural transformation. Now, regarding measurement and assessment frameworks. While considerable progress has been made in developing indicators and tools to assess multifunctionality, methodological heterogeneity remains a challenge. Current approaches often focus on either ecological or economic dimensions, with limited integration of social, cultural, and governance aspects. This is crucial and would be really necessary to work on this issue. There is a clear need for interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinary methodologies that capture the dynamic interactions between ecosystem services, land use, and societal values over time and across spatial scales. Furthermore, longitudinal data and monitoring systems are often lacking, making it difficult to assess the long-term impacts of multifunctional practices on system resilience, climate mitigation, and rural vitality. The development of robust, scalable composite indicators linked to policy goals such as the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and or CAP objectives, so the objectives of the Common Agricultural Policy of the European Union, remains a high research priority. Let's now move on socio-political dynamics and governance innovation. Although multifunctionality is frequently invoked in policy discourse, little is known about how it is interpreted, negotiated, or contested by stakeholders on the ground. More research is needed on the social acceptance, power relations, and institutional arrangements that either facilitate or constrain the adoption of multifunctional practices. So some research questions that would need to be addressed are, for example, how do farmers navigate trade-offs between productivity and ecosystem stewardship? Or what types of governance frameworks best support territorial multifunctionality at landscape or watershed levels? In this regard, participatory governance models, co-designed processes, and place-based policy approaches are promising, but under-researched. Case studies comparing governance innovations across different socio-political contexts, for example, urban versus rural, or north versus south, or developed versus developing countries, all of them could provide insights into transferable models. Regarding economic valuation and incentives, a persistent gap exists in linking multifunctional outcomes to economic valuation mechanisms and compensation systems. While many of the benefits of multifunctionality, such as biodiversity, heritage, or landscape aesthetics, are non-market in nature, they require public or private investment to be sustained. Research is needed to improve methods for valuing non-commodity outputs and designing payment schemes for ecosystem services, carbon markets, or result-based payments that reflect multifunctional performance. More empirical work is needed to evaluate the effectiveness, equity, and efficiency of incentive systems like CAP, eco-schemes, carbon farming credits, or biodiversity offsets in promoting multifunctionality under real-world conditions. Let's now see contextual adaptations and policy learning. Multifunctionality is not a one-size-fits-all model. Its expression is shaped by ecological conditions, historical land use, local knowledge systems, and socioeconomic factors. Future research should focus on comparative, context-sensitive studies that explore how multifunctionality operates in diverse agricultural regions, from peri-urban zones to mountainous area and landscapes. Additionally, there is a need for policy learning frameworks that allow for the exchange of best practices across the European Union member states and globally. Such frameworks should integrate bottom-up experimentations, for example, living labs, territorial contracts, with top-down policy instruments, enabling a learning-based approach to multifunctional transitions. Regarding the living labs, in case you have not heard about them before, this slide is just to explain what they are and how interesting they are. So living labs are youth-centered open innovation ecosystems that integrate research and innovation with real-life communities and settings. Unlike traditional labs, they place citizens and end users at the center of the process, enabling them to co-create and test new products, services, and solutions in a real-world context. This approach ensures solutions are practical, relevant, and grounded in community needs. So this tool, the tool of living labs, is very much used in agroecological research. And if you want to know more about existing living labs in Europe, in your country, you should really check this website out. It's called Sunrise. It's a project. It's an international European project. And if you go on www.sunriseagroecology.eu, you can learn more about existing living labs in several European countries and how they are connected and what are they doing, what are their activities, which events they're organizing, and so you can, if you are a farmer, if you are working in a farm, or if you are a technician or a scientist, or if you work in agroecological area anyway, anywhere in the value chain, you can, or if you want to learn more about it, if you're still a student and you want to learn more about it, you can contact them and you can try to get in touch and participate in one of their events. I really recommend doing this. So, before concluding this lesson, I have a few questions for you. I will read them to you one by one. You can pause the video and answer them. Afterwards, we can look at the answers together. So, what is the main challenge preventing the application of multifunctionality in agriculture? Why is measuring multifunctionality difficult? What can you tell about the context-specific nature of multifunctionality? How do institutional silos affect the implementation of multifunctionality? Which research area is identified as still underdeveloped but important for assessing multifunctionality over time? Why is economic valuation an important research gap in multifunctionality? What can you tell about the importance of governance in multifunctionality? Can you describe the multidimensional nature of multifunctionality? Why does scale matter in the study of multifunctionality? And the last one, what can you conclude about multifunctionality's role in future agriculture? So once you're ready, we can go to check together the answers. So regarding the main challenge preventing the application of multifunctionality in agriculture, we can say that a major challenge is the lack of coherent policy frameworks that address food security, environmental sustainability, and rural development simultaneously. Regarding the reason why it's difficult to measure multifunctionality, that's because multifunctionality includes complex, multidimensional, and often intangible outcomes, such as landscape aesthetic or social cohesion, that are hard to quantify and vary across contexts. Regarding the context-specific nature of multifunctionality, we can tell that multifunctionality is often seen as too context-specific or fuzzy to standardize across regions, since many multifunctional outcomes arise from opportunistic local adaptations rather than planned designs. And regarding the institutional silos and how do they affect the implementation of multifunctionality, we can tell that institutional silos limit cross-sector collaboration, preventing agriculture from being effectively integrated with other land uses, such as energy, tourism, or conservation. And as we already said, these are issues that should be addressed in the near future. Then, which research area is identified as underdeveloped but crucial, very important to address multifunctionality over time? Longitudinal studies that track the evolution, resilience, and economic and social impacts of multifunctional systems are largely underdeveloped and very much needed. Why is economic valuation an important research gap in multifunctionality? Well, because many multifunctional benefits are non-market outputs and better valuation tools are needed to design effective incentives such as payment for ecosystem service schemes, carbon credits, or result-based payments. Regarding the importance of governance in multifunctionality, we can say that governance innovations are essential but understudied in enabling multifunctionality at landscape or territorial scales. And these governance innovations are, for example, participatory models and place-based policies. And finally, we can tell that describing the multidimensional nature of multifunctionality, we can say that it highlights the agriculture contributes to production, ecosystem services, biodiversity conservation, rural employment, landscape management, and cultural diversity. That the scale matter in studying multifunctionality because multifunctionality emerges at multiple levels, and landscape scale planning allows more holistic governance that accounts for spatial patterns and diverse stakeholders. Last but not least, what can you conclude about multifunctionality roles in future agriculture? We can probably say that multifunctionality is presented as both a vision and a pathway for creating agriculture systems that are productive, ecologically regenerative, socially grounded, and culturally meaningful in the face of global challenges. So this is it for now. Thank you for listening to this lesson and keep learning. Do not miss the next lesson to continue discovering the many aspects of multifunctionality in agriculture. There is still much to learn and you certainly don't want to miss this opportunity.